Hello, 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 everyone. Happy Friday. Welcome to another edition of Plant Consciousness Commentary. So it's me, Tia Gardenia. I am, can't believe it's Friday. There's just so much going on right now and so much stuff. It's been solstice. I hope that you had a wonderful solstice celebration, wherever it was that you celebrated. I am still trying to understand all these different pieces here in these platforms. So, pardon me for sometimes taking a minute to get everything ready and everything. But today I have a few different things that I want to talk about. I actually have a paper that I want to go through, but I also want to announce a few pieces. If you're new around here, welcome, welcome, welcome. Do all the beautiful YouTube stuff that we love, like and subscribe and share and all that kind of stuff. That's exactly what makes this go around. And it helps me to continue and to support, what we're doing here. So if you're absolutely new, you've never been here and you want to check out some of my previous live stream commentary that I've done on plant consciousness, you are welcome to go head over to my website, which is just my name, tigriagardenia.com/blog. And you will see all of the, not all of them, but most of the previous shows. I'm still working on it. They're also here on YouTube for those of you that are watching on YouTube and in the Naturally Conscious community if you're watching over in the Naturally Conscious community. So lots of different places for you to see. So basically, what we do here is break down all of the papers around plant consciousness, critical plant studies, plant neurobiology, plant intelligence, all that's coming out in the world of plants that's talking about plants and human relationships. There's this beautiful terminology used by a scientist by the name of Natasha Myers. She's an anthropologist, and she calls it planthropology. And I feel like that's really what we're doing. This is a planthropology stream, and we're talking about all things planthropology in its widest definitions, which is why I wanted to start by sharing with you something that I think was kind of funny that came out. So in the nature briefings that come through, an article came out that just made me laugh. Let me find the exact wording of it so that you can understand. Their commentary, their little snippet was, old genes could improve wheat. Genes from century-old wheat varieties could make the high-yielding but finicky modern crop more resistant to disease or decrease its fertilizer needs. DNA sequencing of more than 800 wheat varieties held in a seed collection from the 1920s and 30s revealed that they contained twice as much genetic diversity as around 200 modern cultivars. I could see that we were exploring a gold mine, says geneticist and study co-author Cheng. By planting the antique crops, the researchers could even pinpoint to some of the genes responsible for traits such as nutritional content and stress tolerance. So there's an article over here. I'm going to share that article so that you can see it, so that you can laugh. Here it is. Gold mine of century-old wheat varieties could help breeders restore long-term traits, which in essence is them saying that older varieties of wheat are healthier and more nutritious and more resilient than newer trait wheat, right? But rather than, which is exactly what we've been saying for the longest time, right? Don't we keep saying that older generations of plants that have not been raised as cultivars, right? Not modified and engineered and all these different things, provide more nutritional content. But rather than planting these old varieties, because if you listen to what I just said, what are they going to do? They're going to splice in the genes of those older varieties of wheat into newer varieties of wheat. It's like, makes no sense whatsoever. But this is exactly what we're still going through relating to all the world of plants. We're still looking at it as in the, how do I engineer plants that work better for me, rather than really seeing plants as the beings that they are. So I don't know. I just had to share that with you because I thought it was just so ridiculous. And it was just a quick snippet of like the types of things that I come across all the time. And these are the conversations we're having in the Naturally Conscious community, right? Inside of the Naturally Conscious community, we continuously have these conversations about how it is that we can really live better in harmony with the plant world, right? How is it that we can create relationships with plants that enhance not just humans? It's not about just making it better for me, but instead takes into consideration who a plant is as a person, as an individual, and that we can co-create a better society together. And that's really what we're looking to do around here, right? We want to talk about these conversations. We want to talk about these topics. We want to have places, safe spaces where we can get into this as much as possible so that we can better understand what does a human and other kin world, a world where we're all at the equal level, where we're all playing together, what does that even look like? And right, and that's exactly why the naturally conscious community exists, right? NCC is that place. It's that place to have those conversations. Plus, we do all kinds of fun stuff there. We just had a book club discussion on the new book that we're reading, Tree Spirits, Grass Spirits. We also had, our writing group. There's just so many things going on there all the time. And I'll just keep, sharing that information so that you can easily find it. But hopefully you will come over there and meet with us and get to know who we are and have these conversations with us. All right. I'm not going to keep going too much about that because I really want to get into today's paper because it looks really fascinating. All right. So here it is. Let's see if I can figure out how to get it in full screen mode. Does that work? But am I allowed to then make, I can. Oh, yes. This is exciting. It's exciting when the technology works. Like it takes me a minute sometimes. So to get it all. So this is a paper that I discovered. I have a very long list, which reminds me, one of the questions that I wanted to ask. Here's a question for all of you. Up until now, from the time that I started doing this, right, the whole premise of starting this work was to start when I first started, I was really working on the idea of how it was that plants, how do I say this? There was so many discussions and arguments happening around plant intelligence and plant consciousness in particular, like, right, does it exist? What does it mean? And all these types of things, right? So when I started from the year, like looking for papers and articles from the years 2000s, right? What does this look like? What was that conversation when it first started? So as we were having this, now, of course, many things have changed since that time. And we have so many more papers coming out on a regular basis. Like every day I find something new that is interesting. It's around, like we're going to talk about today, plants in performance, plants in art, and plant persons, not plants as in I have an object, but really ones that are talking about vegetalized society. What happens when we start to look at plants as, these complementary beings that they are, beings that have all their own faculties. So there's a lot coming out. My question is, do you feel like you would prefer if I go by year? Because up until now, what I've been doing is just trying to go in order, right? First in, first out. So I try to find the older papers, and like this one that we're going to go into today was published in 2018. And so would it be better for me to continue to do that? Or would you prefer that I jump around and basically try to grab whatever's the hot topic at the moment? Or maybe it doesn't matter at all, but I'm just curious. If you are interested in that, please let me know because I'm super curious. You can just put it in the comments or send me a message because I'm trying to organize. I have really a lot of papers to come. I'll probably be adding more live streams during the week just because there's so many interesting things. And I just want to, just want to see what it is that you think about that. Okay. So this is another one on the unusual thread in the sense that we have done one paper before this that was specifically around the world of performance. And it was amazing. It was so interesting because it was around the concept, and you can go back and look again in the naturally conscious community are all the papers that we have explained, papers and articles and opinion pieces. I just use the term papers as a generic for everything, but all of them are there for you to go and look at. And also in YouTube, there's a lot of them. Most of them are there as well as on my blog. I'm working to get YouTube and the blog up at the same, like basically putting them all up there, but it's going to take me a while. Anyway, so when you go, you'll see on the blog, on YouTube, and in the Naturally Conscious community, you can find a previous stream that was about this vegetalized performance. It was plants in performance. And it was explaining and breaking down why the idea that plants can't be active actors, right? Actors in the sense of like literally protagonists in parts of performance is not correct. And it turned out to be an amazing paper. It was super, super, super interesting. And so when I saw this one, Aesthetics for Inhuman Touch, Notes for Vegetalized Performance, I thought, whoa, this might be interesting to see. Always is a tricky ground. Remember, I don't pre-read many of these papers. I might read a few words of the abstract just to make sure that they are plant specific. And that they're, and then they're not ones, but I never know if somebody's going to talk about plants as beings, as persons, or if if the writer or the authors of the paper are going to be talking about plants as objects. So we're going to see this together and we're going to see where we are. So this was published. It was published by Mirko Nikolic and Neda Radulovic from Inroku, which I don't know exactly what it is, special edition in 2018, Practicing New Materialisms in the Arts. And so there's the link. And of course, I'm going to include all the links and everything in the show notes when I do this. So there's already a footnote, which, we like footnotes. Let me move myself over to the side so that I can see this better. So in this footnote, it says vegetalization or plantification, I already like those words, is a practice proposed by Natasha Myers, which I already mentioned when I was talking about planthropology. See, like everything kind of comes together. She is amazing when it comes to, because she was a dancer. So she has already this tendency to look at the vegetal performance space in form of multi-species yoga exercise for cultivating your inner plant, or as I call it, your inner plantness. In Conversations on Plant Sensing, Notes from the Field, which we have reviewed exactly this one. Conversations on Plant Sensing, Notes from the Field. You can go through and look at the previous edition on that. I'll include it into the show notes as well. Myers furthers that plant scientists' sensoria get vegetalized over the long duration of their exponential inquiry. And also, which is in line with the line of our article, that concepts can be vegetalized. So I'm going to write myself a note. Of course, I want to write myself a note, but I have to find my pencil because, that's the way that things are today. My desk is a little bit messier than it normally is. Okay. So I just wanted to kind of mark that, we are, don't ask, man. I'm just doing things. Okay. Anyway. All right. Sorry. It's Friday. It's been raining. It's one of those days. Okay. Let's get into this. Let me make myself a little bit smaller so that I can hopefully see myself better. Okay. Beyond human performance, touching the inhuman. What do you think about that word, inhuman? Do you like that? I don't know. Inhuman. Today, inhuman doesn't really have a good connotation, does it? I would say I hate the fact that we put humans at the centerpiece of all of this. This still frustrates me because we always call things around, other than, more than human, even other kin, which is what I use. I like the idea of other kin because it doesn't centralize to human. But the fact that we call other just implies that there is a non-other, which would be human. I can't figure it out. I would like to just get to the place where we're just using the word kin, and kin is speaking about everybody, and including ourselves, but I don't think we're there yet. So I think we just have to keep working with words like inhuman or more than human or other than human or other kin and stuff like that. But if you have a better idea with the words, please let me know. Okay. Even though there are a growing number of performances with other than human subjects, see, there it is. Excuse me. Ooh. With other than human subjects, both organic and inorganic, as well as groundbreaking research in the fields of critical animal studies, post-humanisms, and more recently critical plant studies, which give evidence to more than human agencies, performance studies still center on the idea of performance on human animals. And this goes back to that other paper that we read that is really about this conversation. And it was very much went into the reason why we do this and why it's not necessary, why there are ways for us to look at plants as actors. I'm curious as to if they're going to reference that paper here. Human exclusivity in performance studies is completely normalized, and the abuse of non-humans for the sake of art is rarely questioned, mirroring the exclusion of non-humans in philosophy and or ethics. In general, public and political economy and law, artists often get praise for entertaining the audience for rather simplistically displaying animals alive, dead, or dying. Some famous examples will include Damien Hirst's installation featuring dead livestock, sharks, and killing butterflies, or Maurizio Catalan's sculptures featuring live and dead animals. Oh, and let's not even talk about how many plants get killed when you're creating a performance piece. Yeah, we're not even talking about like plants that are killed for, whatever, for the clothing or whatever. Let's just leave that for a second. But how many plants are literally killed on stage in different performances, knocking over a vase, or, putting in fresh flowers and constantly killing plants just for that? The fact that too many living beings serve as food and commodities makes it even harder to account for these artists and problematize their abuse. The paradox is even more evident with the death of the non-human body that is so normalized that it gets equated with beautiful or appealing. As for example, flower plants traditionally serve in all and predominantly aesthetic areas of human culture. Let me just say this. I don't know where you are on your plant reawakening, but if you are anything like me, you will notice that as time goes by, just a warning to you, as time goes by, the ability for you to buy cut flowers, that will become more difficult. Just saying. It will become more difficult. It just is. It's more difficult. Just more difficult. On the one hand, a paragon of natural beauty and an expression of harmony, symmetry, color, and other aesthetic qualities, in itself, which actually transforms it into the perfect object of sight and object of art. Consequently, the destruction of the plants for the sake of art might go unnoticed even if it is staged. Footnote, we missed a 2. Where was footnote 2? Hold on. There's footnote 2. Footnote 2. It is also curious to note that in these cases, the works are classified as installations or sculptures, thus entirely objectifying animal bodies. Very true. And footnote 3, which is even if it is staged. Oh, this is going to drive me a little bit crazy. All right. See, for example, performance of Jan Faber Mount Olympus to glorify the cult of tragedy, where performers simulate sex with potted plants. Okay. A process which theatrically devastates the plants, and bloody animal flesh drops from performers' pants, both used as shock and tactic. Well then. Okay. Aesthetics, as a modern discipline developed by the way of objectification of plants and animals, for example, through the notion of landscapes as well as still life. In this, we have to say that mainstream aesthetics has participated in objectification, consummation, and fragmentation of other than human bodies, discursive procedures that Carol Adams individuated in the context of woman and animal, and we would add plant. Ooh, I like it that you're offering plant othering. I agree. And these are those things that, remember, I keep saying that we're starting to get into the era of the hard questions, right? We have had some of these questions in the world of critical plants, of animals, right? Of animal studies and such. We've started to get into this conversation around the concept of what is fair use, and it's still fair use. How do animals need to be treated in a performance space and in other aspects? And while we still do objectify, there is a lot more movement around the idea of, especially some kind of domesticated animals, as not really objectifying them, although we do objectify a whole series of other kinds of animals. But in the world of plants, this conversation is happening 0 to none. Giovanni Aloi is talking a little bit about this in the context of design, and where do plants live in the world of design as part of the design, but also designers through their own individual actions. But when it comes to performance, please, nobody's talking about this now. Nobody. One of the main strategies for cultural normalization of non-human death, as many authors have argued, is, for example, the tactic of spatial, material, and discursive disassociation, disconnection of the corpses from the once living being. For example, the slaughter is often invisible and spatially distant from the consumers, whilst linguistically, there is a differentiation between the animal as the living being and animal as dietary commodity food. As Catherine Gillespie argues, the animals lose their animal names and are instead identified as meat product that will be produced by their slaughter, which is, look, to get into this conversation even deeper, go check out last week's live stream, right? The live stream that was in all about this particular concept. And it was in, let me get the exact name for you, because, you know, Mimi, there's so many things going on that I forget the actual official name. But last week we did, critical ecofeminism, interrogating meat, species, and plants. And this was fascinating for exactly this conversation. It's definitely one that you want to go check out if you didn't have a chance to do it. The animals lose their animal names and are instead identified as the meat product that will be produced by their slaughter. This method of labeling the animals as the consumable product is a step in disconnecting the consumer from the animal itself and represents the commodification of the animal while still living. Kind of like when you go to a flower shop. If the death of non-humans figures predominantly as edible, aesthetic, or wearable commodity in most people's lives and cultures worldwide, how do we even start to think about the idea of performance practice that liberates them from this position? Good question. It's a good question. It's a great question. Here we can observe the paradox even when an animal appears on stage, its other than human body is an extremely precarious, if not dangerous, position. With the performance art having background in rituals, the animal in performances were most commonly sacrificed in some form of pseudo-ritual or nostalgic reimaging of the ritual. Animal in this type of performances is not performer or even a subject of performance, but an object. Here we might think of an endless proliferation of Hermann Nietzsche's performance involving slaughtered animals, or the pseudo-shamanistic approach of Joseph Beuys. Often, performers use the legal possibilities of killing an animal to induce emotional response from the audience. For example, Croatian performance artist Vlasta Delimar killed a hen as a way of reminiscing about her late aunt Marichka, and her ex-Yugoslav artist, Rasha okay, I'm not even going to pronounce that. In his performance, Decisions as Art, when he tortured a fish by drinking and puking the water from the fish tank until the fish completely suffocated. Why? Why do we have to do that? Why? In these cases, we see that cultural inclusion can reiterate real-life oppression and exploitation, even when the artists themselves want to criticize or highlight the issue. The question of other than human performances, as this article will show, stretches far beyond the question of ethics. It is a question that challenges the very foundations of performance studies, namely the notion that the performative is defined by its speech privilege. Furthermore, that the condition of possibility for performative action is the very ability to speak or to argue or to tell you to screw off. But it is true. We watch this in performance of all sorts all the time, right? We see, now there's the disclaimer, no animals were hurt in this performance. But even the fact of, is the animal, and when we're talking about animals, and we're going to get into the plant soon, right? How is the animal chosen to be a part of this performance? Has that animal, notice I always default to the word plant, it's about to come out of my mouth. Has that animal been asked whether or not they even want to be part of this performance, right? This is a big piece of it that we don't do this. The argument that we want to pursue is that the very notion of performance needs a more than human, post-human perspective in order for the material performances to start to acknowledge all the becomings and relations that emerge and constitute the event of worlding, of making the world. In this article, we will focus on plants, both in terms of theorizing vegetal performativity, which I love, as well as providing an analysis of significant performance practice with plants. Hold on. Um, and sorry. Okay, we will discuss the place of plants in performance. Tackling the issue of the lack of recognition of their agency, exploitation, and or abuse of plants in for arts. More importantly, we will discuss what and even if there is a place for humans in the capacious world of vegetal performativity by stating by starting from their mode of being becoming. By understanding non-human performativity completely outside of artistic performances might help us get closer to the post-human performativity from the perspective of ethics of care. I don't know if it's from the perspective of ethics of care. I know we want to try to take it into the ethics, but I wonder how much of this, instead of ethics of care, is more from the performance of relationality, like relationship. I wonder how much, instead of trying to go down an ethical discussion, I don't know what discussion they're going to go to now, right? But it's very easy for us to go down an ethical discussion and think that that's the way we want to address this. But I don't know if that's really the way we want to address it. Could it be that it's actually better to address this entire discussion from the perspective of what happens when we recognize plants and animals as our partners in this? And then from that partnership, what does performance look like? I don't know. You let me know if you think which way it should go. But I just wonder if ethics, it hasn't worked up until now. And I'm just wondering if it's not the right direction for us to do. Only from the standpoint we can start thinking about the possibilities of performing together with plants and for plants. The question that this article pursues is how we can theorize the performance and not center the human as the only producer and or creator of the event. That's what I'm talking about. I think it's really more about the relationship, specifically in the context of performances involving plants. In this, we are drawing from the current work at the intersection of critical animal and plant studies with post-humanism to challenge the very notion of performance as understood in humanist cultural studies. Yeah. Taking, for example, the often used and seemingly broad definition by Erica Fisher-Licht. Performance is a participatory event that is created out of the interactions of participants. By this definition, the term performance can refer to a wide variety of events, a traditional theater performance in a proscenium theater in which the actors and the audience are strictly separated, a happening in which these roles are not so clearly demarcated, a soccer game with spectators as well as church mass, a wedding as well as political convention, a funeral as well as World's Fair. Most definitions of performance agree that it is a singular, unique event that emerges when bodies meet and interact with each other, both temporarily and materially connected within the same time-space coordinates. Audience and performers meet and react to each other. In other words, all the participants of the performance react to their environment. What happens during the performance is not the chain of actions and reactions, but multiplying reactions of both audience and performers, everybody equally reacting to everyone. The reactions can be diverse, both somatic and cognitive. External, think of someone sneezing during the performance, or forgetting to turn off the phone. Or internal, we might think of something that happened before, or quietly suffer the consequences of what we ate, for example. And if someone would bark or sing it, would constitute and shape it accordingly. This is really reminding me of the days that I was an actor and like what it was like, the difference between theater versus film and the relationship with, the audience in each one of those. Oh, that's another story for another day. These differentially unpredictable reactions to importantly different environments and circumstances constitute what is called a performance. All the participants create the performance together. Performance and audience together co-author the event. Even though apparently inclusive and democratic definitions might allow multi-species agencies involved in the process of co-creation, the epistemic Epistemic privilege is undoubtedly granted exclusively to humans, as well as the becoming, the liveliness of the artistic production. The human body is a unique aesthetic material. It is a living organism. Um, the plants and the humans are also living organisms, always in a state of becoming. The plants and the animals are also in a state of becoming. That is a continual process of transformation. With every breath and every moment, the body creates itself anew. Bodily being in the world, not being but becoming, contradicts the concept of the artwork as a product. The human body can only become an artwork as a corpse. Performance, therefore, pits itself against reification of the body, but whose bodies count as bodies? Is that a body? Oh, there's another footnote. Hold on. This is a footnote. Where are my footnotes? It says a 2 there, but there's no footnote. Okay. All right. What about non-humans? Obviously, if it wasn't specified, this could apply to the non-human bodies as well. But the fact that it is specified makes it very explicit at equating the notion of the body, the liveliness, the artistic creation, and the transformation as exclusively human characteristics. The complements to the fact that, linguistically speaking, if a plant co-authors the performance, does it get a credit? And did not we not have that conversation just recently, right? I just posted about this in the naturally conscious community because there is it's just embryonic. It's embryonic, but there is the beginning now of the idea that music in particular that is captured in a natural setting, like a forest where you capture the sounds of the birds and stuff, are getting a credit as that forest, which of course it would be hard, almost impossible, I have to admit, to try to give credit to every single being that created that, especially because, in a forest, who knows how many birds there are and where those birds are and such like that. But I mean, just the idea that they're starting to give the credit to the forest is already a step in the right direction. And I know that when I create for example, when I publish my podcast or when I create a meditation, if there is a plant that is involved in that production, whether it is for me, a co-author, or they produce the music. So if Kin produced the music, for example, if you go and you look, I try really hard on Insight Timer. They don't want to accept it, but I put Spider Plant as the musician every single time. And I've even created an email address, spiderplant at, to be able to capture any kind of information that they want to know about Spider Plant, because Spider Plant is the musician. Spider Plant created the music using the music of the plants device, which is what we used in order to create that. So the fact that we have worked with, we're working with plants in those ways. I also credit, for example, the different plants that worked, poinsettia and a few other plants that work with me on the episodes. For example, the music, the intro and the outro music for my podcast was Steve Shuley and poinsettia. And I always say it in the podcast episode because it's extremely important to recognize that this plant is the musician. And if in the creation of the podcast itself, the episode, whether it's Spider Plant or now recently Noel, the Christmas cactus, who's working with me, Noel's over here to the side, so hence why I'm pointing over. But Noel and I have been working much more on the businessy side of stuff. And so therefore I credit either Spider Plant or, or Noel, because these are the plants that I work with and they are a part of the production. And I think it's extremely important that even though I am the face right now, just the same as I have a team, a human team that works behind me, right? My designer, Veronica Chardas, and my marketing person of That Smart Business. And all of these are people that are humans that are working with me, but there's also other kin, right? There are plant people that work with me quite closely on all of these different productions. And it's important to give them their credit. And in some case, and how is it that I, quote unquote, compensate them? Some of them I'm going to be compensating them through money, other than my compensate through care or through whatever it is that they ask, because some of them can be pretty bossy. They tell me exactly what it is. And I think that this is important, that when it comes to performance, we need to credit all of the animals and the plants that are part of the performance, because without them, the performance wouldn't be what it is, right? Even if we're talking about flowers, we are talking about plants that gave their flowers to this production. And so it is not about crediting the florist, because it isn't the florist that provided the plants. It is the plants that provided the flowers. And I think we need to start moving our vocabulary and our understanding to these levels. Who gets that credit? If we define performance as bodies being, and more importantly than who gets the credit, who gets the royalty? Because that's the other piece of this, right? When we were talking about the music and I was talking about how now forests are being credited, right? It is because a piece of that royalty money should go back to the organizations that are caring for that forest, right? That money should be spent on that forest. And the same is for me. Like I said, I compensate my team, my human team get a monetary compensation, or they get other kinds of rewards, and the other people who work with me and help me and do things. And so, but that also means that I have humans like are getting one kind of compensation, but so are the plants. Plants are also getting their own form of compensation, obviously through the nourishment that they get, the way that I take care of them and such. And when something goes well based on an idea that came from that plant, I try to celebrate from that plant. Noelle just got an amazing new pot, like huge, huge. I don't know what got it. Noelle was like, I do not like small. And so Noelle is in a very, very big plant. I mean, a pot, much too big for Noelle, right? Much too big for you today. But Noelle's like, look, I'm going to grow and I'm going to grow big. I need space. So moved from another space. Noelle was actually up here and Noelle was like not liking it, then moved over there and was like not liking this at all. Ended up over here. And now all of a sudden is like, oh, I got space. I is growing. I is growing. So this is how I compensate Noelle. But and spider plants in a whole other world is getting compensated in a completely different way. So, but this is the credit needs to go to that, that actor, which is that plant or that animal and such. If we define performance as bodies being present at the same time, we have to ask inevitably, whose presence counts as such. How do we define the body in the performance? Who are the implied subject objects of performance? All right, Michelle, I missed your comment about body modification and tattoos. So sorry, I don't know what we're talking about because I forgot it. Although you know me, I'm a fan of body modification and tattoos. Jill, Noelle is rather large pot and sitting way over there. I will take a picture and I will post a picture in NCC of Noelle. Noelle is going to be, Noelle is being very loud lately. So I have no doubt that more pictures are going to come. So soon I will work on getting a picture of Noelle out to everybody. I promise I'll do it. Far from thinking of itself as exclusivist, performance studies in general tend to frame the event of performance as a non-hierarchical co-becoming and to elaborate the generation of aesthetics by employing a concept of liminality. The term generated from the Latin word limen, which means threshold and refers to a ritual subject that is not here nor there, but is a betwixt and between. Importantly, throughout the liminal phase, ritual subject is symbolically in the state of transition. And during that time, their identity is in the process of becoming, which is a consequence of destabilized cultural and social categories. The concept was very useful for understanding the performance, mainly because it clearly conveys the transformative potential of the performance. The identity changes after the completion of the liminal phase, but also accentuates the important aspect that is the affect of stripping of secular identities and immersing oneself into de-hierarchized community of equals or community of equals or communitas. That way, the concept of liminality aims to convey the inclusivity and at the same time to depart from identifying performance, as exclusively social phenomenon and thus to determine its supposedly aesthetical character. But in effect, it achieves the opposite. It is centered around the feeling of belonging, escaping a specific, fixed, and rounded social identity, thus perpetuating a nature-culture divide and eventually erasing the inhuman relationalities. I still don't like this word inhuman. I'm going to switch inhuman to otherkin. You let me know if it sounds good. And becoming both as material creators and producers of meanings. Eventually, performance studies reveal itself as immersed in the hierarchy of existing social, cultural, and political structures, thus completely incapable of granting identity and recognition to the agencies that are not yet recognized by the law and or other social cultural institutions. Is that true, though? Is that true? I mean, I think you have to make a deliberate attempt. I think in order I think it has to be deliberate. It has to be a desired and a chosen part of the performance in order to separate outside of those cultural norms. Other words, of course, yeah, it's just going to follow in with the exact same cultural norms and biases, and it's just going to follow the norm. In order to account for material agency and participation provided by other kin in performance practice, it is necessary to problematize the humanist notion of performance from several perspectives. Firstly, to account for materiality, the more than human agencies as constitutive of the event. Yeah, I mean, they are part of, not only a part of it, they are creators of it in their own performance, just the same as any actor or performer is. This will inherently bring multi-species perspective to the understanding of the performance. Along these lines, it would be important to account other kin bodies as bodies. In order to do that, we will turn to post-human performativity, which will allow us to take a look at the notion of performativity as more than human. We find post-humanist performativity to be an apt framework from which to rework the understandings of the body and performativity in performance art, especially in the way it is developed in the work of science studies scholars Andrew Picking and Karen Barad. This notion of performativity is radically departing from concepts developed by Austin, which was concerned with exploring the language as action bearer, how to do things with words. Oh, there's a footnote. I like footnotes. It is important to note, hold on, it is important to note that post-human performativity also differs from the more materially oriented notion of gender performativity developed by Judith Butler, in a sense that extends beyond the identity politics and or as cultural construction and taps into the realm of the performativity activity agentiality of matter itself. Well, that was a lot. Posthumanist performativity considers the notion of performativity as a complex entanglement of discourse and matter, where discourse, which can be linguistic or not, we all know a lot of discourse that's not linguistic, is only one part of the mangle. I like mangle there. Importantly, posthumanist theories of performativity are what we call flattened ontologies. Look, epistemology and ontology are always going to be on your bingo cards when you listen to this, by the way. If you're taking note of what words get used, always ontology, epistemology. We've already had epistemic, and now we have ontological. It's just there. It's their favorite words of this entire academic world. It's amazing. It's amazing. Therefore, they see neither matter nor discourse as foundational in metaphysical terms. And that's the other one that I did not expect to see. Metaphysical. Shows up just about in every paper too. I guess I grew up with a little bit too much of metaphysical being very close to the esoteric. I love that they use the like broader definition of metaphysical. Anyway, it's on a little aside on my side. Instead, the performativity of matter subverts the inherent hierarchization, which renders it passive, less valuable, and the other of the logos, rendering materiality as dynamic and agential. Agential. Ooh, I love these words. Barrett's project of intra-action is based on the idea of differential positionality within material discursive entanglements. I'm going to say that whole sentence again, just because there's just a whole lot of words and concepts in there that I think require another moment. Barad's project of intra-action is intra, not inter, intra, is based on the idea of differential positionality within material discursive entanglements with the world. That's a concept. And hinges on the recognition derives from Niels Bohr's quantum theory that we are a part of that nature we seek to understand. How often do we talk about that in NCC? We, our nature. I don't know why this concept is so hard for us to remember. I think it's because, our world is so physically built badly that I think we think that to admit that I am nature means I have to go, I don't know, live in a jungle. I have to go kind of become completely wild. Like I'm not even allowed to speak. I just have to grunt or become vegetalized in a way that is kind of in a vegetative state, the way we think about this. Like it's a really difficult concept for us to understand that we are the nature we seek to understand. It's just as much a part of us, and we are a part of the, yeah, yeah. I'm all for duality, but the separation is pretty intense, man. It is closely related to that too, and in line with Donna Haraway's theorization of situated knowledges. The two authors have opened numerous ethico-political questions about what interspecies practices of knowing and being entail, and how to make ourselves more responsible, so able to respond to the world, which is, again, that's that separation. If I recognize that I am a part of the world, then I am always simultaneously creating as well as responding to. In performance art, this can be understood as attempting to incite liminal transitions beyond nature-culture divide, acknowledging participation from human and more than human agencies. For this reason, we will try to shift our focus to the ability to affect and to move, change, transform as the condition of possibility of the performance. By shifting the center from the ideas of presence, privileging logos, and body, privileging human body, we will turn to the notions of touch, both materially and semiotically, and effect, accounting both human and otherkin bodily abilities to change and ignite change, following the concept of posthumanist and, in our case, vegetal performativity. Plants, we will claim, or we do claim, because aren't you claiming it right now, perform in various ways without any. Look, these characters over here, wait, where is it? I can't tell. No, this way. Yeah. This one right here, always performing, always performing, always. An easy way to figure this out is to take a stroll in a meadow and to get immersed into a field of effect. Walk among the flowers and you see faces turned towards you, though not only you, beckoning, greeting, informing, promising, meaning. If we leave aside Paulin's anthropomorphized language, here we glimpsed vegetal's capability for interspecies and even interkingdom materialing. Way more like interkingdom. We're the only species that don't do interkingdom mattering or any kind of like relations. We're the only ones that separate ourselves out from the other kingdoms. All the other kingdoms all touch amongst themselves, right? They're performing, they're exactly right. Jill says it. How is kin performing? There. That's it. Everything is a performance. And this was something we talked about in the last episode, right? Where we talked about vegetal performance. I totally lost my pencil. We totally talked about this, right? We talked about the fact that performance is a state of becoming and of being and of interacting. It's all a performance. All the world is a stage, right? And this is exactly how kin perform. This is how kin perform, through this way. Performative practices have, over the recent years, opened up towards vegetal agency, in new ways. And this is the territory that this article inhabits. A number of performance artists take plants to be co-performers, participating subjects rather than objects, sentient and even intelligent. No, not even sentient and intelligent. I am crossing out that word. That word does not exist because it's like even intelligent. No, sentient and intelligent beings to collaborate with. There are numerous ways in which humans can approach plants as co-performers or to join vegetal performances. The variety of vegetal skills affords them vegetalization. This is what Myers writes in 2014, which I'm assuming is the plant sensing, which I've already reviewed and I've had commentary on. Go back and look for it. It's awesome. It's a great paper. Of an art is underway, and we are writing from within it's within this blooming field. Taking plants as radical difference in delusion sense, we will turn to plant performances to account for all possible alterations and understand performance as an event of inclusivity and co-creation. Following critical plant studies, we thus begin by asserting that plants sense and act in distinct ways. We already know this part. And draw on post-human humanism. We take that worlding is fundamentally a performativity. Thus, we understand that plants are performative beings engaging in differential intra-activity. From this standpoint, we will think that what does understandings of vegetal performativity bring to specifically artist performances that involve plants? To begin to understand this, we will diffract notions of affect theory and agential realist performative onto okay, I'm going to start it again because I love these types of sentences. These sentences are the ones that I'm like, huh, if I was in academia still, I would be writing like that. To begin to understand this, we will diffract notions of affect theory and agential realist performative onto epistemology of interaction to explore them in the context of vegetal performativity. A potential middle ground for meeting for affect and interaction is the rich world of vegetal performativity. Okay, so we're on number 2. Actually, I'm just curious. How long is this paper? Oh, it's long. Okay, it's a lot longer than I thought it would be. All right. No problem. I'm just asking. Okay, wait, where were we? We're on number 2, right? 2, 2, 2. 2, 2, 2, where are you? No, that's 3. Okay, I'm going to have to stop interrupting this as much as I have been so that we can get through it a little bit more. Because we're getting to the good stuff, folks. Hello. Oh, there's 2. Okay. Let's go and view it again in that view. Ooh. Oh, no, that's too complicated. Okay. Okay. Sorry. Vegetal performativity, effective intra-activity. Why does this look so much? Didn't it look smaller now that it was, because it was smaller? Sorry. Vegetal performativity provides a standpoint from which one could advance a reconfiguration of post-human humanist theories of performativity and, importantly, glimpse how human vegetal artistic performances might unfurl. I like that word. Unfurl. To pursue this, we propose a diffractive reading of conceptual frameworks of affect and intra-action in relation to vegetable mode of being, or as a follow-up on Martyr's plant thinking, of vegetal performativity. Post-humanist theories of performativity are starting point, though perhaps not an endpoint, in drawing up a specifically vegetal performativity. Plants not only in important ways participate in post-humanist art philosophy space of shared theoretical and practical experimentation, but, as we shall try to show, are a distinct discourse that positively challenges the present theorizations of affect and intra-actions. Ooh, we have another footnote. Oops. So hard to, the footnotes are hard for me to read. Okay, oops, sorry, not that one. Working out through details of these different approaches is subject to an emerging field of scholarship. Ooh, so there's a new scholarship field that's kind of coming out of this. Okay, good. Entanglement of humans and plants is an evolutionary phenomenon. but it is not fixed in time. It is an ongoing performativity, and we won't be able to live more than a few seconds without oxygen plants separate from the atmosphere, or more than a few days without eating them. However, culturally speaking, the place of plants is quite less primary, as it has been compellingly demonstrated in recent critical plant studies. In Judeo-Christian tradition, as well as in Western philosophy, since at least the Greeks, plants have been relegated to the bottom of the hierarchy of living beings. And as always, we always come back to Aristotle, because Aristotle was the first jerk to put plants at the bottom of the scale. Grr, grr. To counter these narratives of exclusion or backgrounding, the above-cited authors, together with others, have reasserted the inextricableness of vegetal materiality and discursivity with those of humans. These philosophical or cultural studies investigations have run hand in hand and in conversation with recent advances in plant science and their popularization. Groundbreaking findings have centered on vegetal capabilities of perception, communication, and learning. Oh, what's the footnote? I'm afraid of this footnote. Oh, okay. There's just a list of the literature, which is all literature we have talked about a million times, and many of us have read it all together, which is great because, yeah. Sorry, hold on a second. Okay, sorry. These various strands converge into the claims about plant cognition and ultimately plant intelligence. At first, these topics might indicate certain anthropomorphic biases, but plant scientists have brought about important decentering of the human. Hence why you should go back and look through all of our plant commentary, because we've gone through all those papers. Everything that's being cited here, we have talked about already. But plant scientists have brought important decentering of the human. One of the leading scientists in the field, Anthony Travavas, proposes it is not too much to say that a plant is capable of cognition in much the same way that a human being is. The plant gathers information about its surroundings, combines this with the internal information about its inner state, and makes decisions that reconcile its well-being with the environment. It should be borne in mind that, according to various estimates, plants amount to around 99.7% of the biomass. That's changed suddenly, by the way. It's about 85% of the biomass, but the rest of it is mainly bacteria and fungi. Really, when we come to animals and humans, we're talking about less than 1%. Earth is an ecosystem inarguably dominated by plants. See, that's why he's taking the statistic from Mancuso's book from 2015, and that's already changed. It's amazing to think that it's already changed from 99% to 85%. It's crazy to think about it. Regarding plants as highly advanced and intelligent creatures possess numerous ethical and political challenges too. For example, political economies of agriculture and forestry. We've also gone through an excellent paper about, what was it called? The plant device, which really highlighted some of the political and economic issues around like changes that have to happen if we're going to acknowledge plants as intelligent. Definitely worth seeing, super interesting. For what interests us, arts and humanities have a task. And in the last instance, the morality of eating plants. I'm not going to get into that right now. But for what interests us, arts and humanities have the task ahead of rendering justice to these complex beings, imagining and fostering more just and responsible entanglements than what modernity or the agricultural-driven Neolithic had done. And this is where one of the reasons why I pick these types of papers is because it is so incredibly important for us to be having these conversations in artistic realms that allow more variety and more space. Artistic realms of performance and all forms of art allow us to reimagine what this landscape will look like. And so if we cannot get the arts first and foremost to recognize plants as intelligent, as sentient, and as active actors in any kind of performance, then how are we going to redefine and reimage the way that we look at plants? It's impossible. We need to start with the artistic communities to open the space, because the artistic communities allows the kind of normal humans or the general population to think, imagine, and dream in ways that are unexpected. So it is imperative for us to have these conversations about vegetalized performance, where plants are not just being the passive actors, but instead are being present and are part of the becoming and of the actual storyline. This is just super important to talk about. It's just super important. It's just super important. In post-humanist terms, plants are deeply involved in lively interactions with and without humans. Barad's statement is at its most vivid if we think of vegetal-animal interactions. Things don't pre-exist. They are agentially enacted and become determinately bounded and proportioned within phenomenon. Purported, my God, I can't speak today, within phenomena. This passage, one of the founding moves of agential realism, is often attributed to the quantum level of reality, thus slightly outside social studies concerns. To stress the obvious, we are incessantly inside phenomena that involve vegetal agencies. Everything. Relata within phenomena emerge through specific intra-actions. Humans and other animals emerge through evolutionary, biochemical, and physiological interactions with the vegetal world. It's impossible for us to not. So, of course, this is why this is so important. Taking on board joint efforts of critical plant studies, plant intelligence, and biosemiotics, for our purposes, we take that plants are bodies capable of agency, interaction, and affection. Plants affect other beings via various means, for example, by producing scents or by making flowers. These affections contain strong aesthetic components directed at individual animals or captivating entire cultures. Vegetals produce fields of affect that are actualized through inter-kingdom, cross-species molecular interactions. In their rereading of bee orchid and bees interactions, Althwart dominant biological explanations, Carla Hustak and Natasha Myers ask, what if the topology of insect orchid encounters were conditioned not just by a calculating economy that aims to maximize fitness, but also, and I ask you to think about this because this is a great question, and this is in one of her other papers, but also by an effective ecology shaped by pleasure, play, and experimental propositions. This is something that is still in the Darwinian sort of world. As much as I support Darwin for so much that he gave us, Darwin made everything about survival, everything about mating, everything about that next step. What about pleasure and play? We see it in animal behaviors. We see it in human behaviors. And according to scientists like Mancuso, we also see it in plant behaviors. The way small shoots will play in a pot by moving around. I see that in the Dipladenia that I have up here. The way that everything is moving is not solely for surviving, right? The plant has a firm grasp. The plant has those appendages already have a solid base. So why not play during the day? Why not allow myself to stretch and to contract and to move in all these different ways? That is the performance of being, right? That is play. Why do we forget about play? Hostak and Myers thus look at how anatomical articulations among species indicate practices of joining together and building alliances, affinities, and connections. This goes in line with Elizabeth Groff's feminist reading of Darwin, whereby she sees art operating on evolutionary timescales. Art and nature, art in nature, share a common structure, that of excessive and useless production, production for its own state, production for the sake of profusion and differentiation. The ground for this radically expanded notion of artistry is Deleuze and Guattari's claim that art begins with the animal. In their description, art deals with precepts and affects. Artists are presenters of affects, the inventors and creators of affect. Taking it further, a little below, Deleuze and Guattari expand. Rendon entitled A Lithograph, there was perhaps a first vision attempted in the flower. The flower sees pure and simple terror. And do you see that sunflower looking in through the bedroom window? It stares into my room all day. Plants are participants in creation and transmission effect, but in ways somewhat different than what Spinoza and Deleuze and Guattari envisaged. Spinoza, the philosopher of affect, it considered that at least animals were capable of affect, specifically of appetite or desire. It always goes down to appetite and desire. It's like fun, just for the sake of it. The emotions of the animals, which are called irrational, only differ from man's emotions because we seem to forget that we are animals. Why do we forget this? Why do we forget this? To the extent that brute nature differs from human nature. Horse and men are alike carried away by the desire of procreation, but the desire of the former is equine, the desire of the latter is human. So also the lusts and appetites of insects, fishes, and birds must needs vary according to several natures. I'm not even going to respond to that because yeah. Extending Spinoza into, for him, unforeseen vegetal trajectory and in line with Hustak and Myers, we can advance that plants and insects in the above entanglements are affected by desire. They are desiring bodies, or to say it in the plane of Deleuze and Guattari's anti-Oedipus, desiring machines. But, and here is the thing, vegetal desires go far beyond procreation. Plants are profoundly queer nature, as the earliest botanists realized, with intense desires for transitioning and becoming others. Ooh, we've also studied Sandelez in our plant consciousness commentary. So another one that's so good to, yeah, so. Furthermore, contra any organismic paradigm that sees body or even species as delimited, plants are decentralized, rhizomes, networks, or swarm intelligences. This is where we return to interaction. Plants rehearse boundary redrawing intensely and extensively. They experiment all day long with forces and elements in their proximity. This experimentation stems from an intense attention towards the outside. Competing signals vie for plants' attentions, localized and dispersed throughout all its organs without exception. In other words, plants are interested in becoming affected all over and intense ways. This is why I'm convinced I'm plant. I know I am plant. I know I am plant. It can be said that plants practice liminality in their encounters with the world. Yeah, I'm definitely plant. This liminal affectivity means, in Deleuze's reading of Spinoza, living through encounters with other bodies means a melodic line of continuous variation. In diffraction with Baran, through an interaction, marks are left on bodies. Bodies differentially materialize as particular patterns of the world as results of the specific cuts and reconfiguring that are enacted. Almost in unison, Deleuze explains affections, the first type of knowledge, as the trace of another body on my body, being affected, being object inside of intra-action. What matters is what kind of traces are being made and left. Are they joyful or sad? And for whom? We should stop thinking of the form of plants as contained contours or surfaces. Vegetal bodies are zones of intense exchanges of molecules, veritable fields of affectivity where topologies of the world are being reconfigured. Perhaps closest to vegetal mode of being, Deleuze in his lecture on Spinoza describes affection as mixture, mélange. This performativity of mixing with the world is grounded in radical openness, the ethical injunction for openness to the other. The plant's future is entirely contingent on alterity when it comes to the process of ripening, the possibilities of flourishing and withering away, and so forth. This is not a form of passivity. It is an agential responsibility experimentation with capacities to be affected, entangled with a quest for finding ways to respond. Plants are as powerful, or let us say, joyful, as an assemblage they root in and branch into, as their collectivity of fuzzy boundaries and partial affiliations. In posthumanist terms, plants are beings of intra-activity. Their bodies tell stories of agentiality, of the world, of encounters with differences, of queer mixtures of agencies, more than congealing of agency, less than strata. I'm enjoying that too much. Vegetal performativity is to some degree common to all living beings. Back at the origins of non-vegetal thinking, the first type of soul in Aristotle's De Anima is vegetal or nutritive soul. Yeah, but the rest of Aristotle's stuff, man. Do we have to talk about Aristotle? Why is it? Epistemological, ontology, and Aristotle. It seems like we can't come through one paper that does not mention all of these. One paper. Capacity for growth, but also for decay and the assimilation of nutrients. One point of view on nutritive soul is that it manifests as desire, or in Nietzsche, the will to accumulate force. However, and here we follow Martyr, this characterization, we like Michael Martyr, this characterization is incompatible with the nine identity and divisibility of plants. Contra this idea of increase or accumulation of power, Martyr describes vegetal soul as dispersed, infinitely divisible, other to itself and hospitable to other. Darwin does come up yeah, you're right. Darwin does come up a lot too. We have to give Darwin is big. Aristotle and Darwin are always cited. Yeah, epistemology, ontology. There was one more that I said that comes up quite a bit, but these are the big powerhouses. You're right. Where am I? Oh, sorry. Yeah, vegetal soul is that which is most widely shared, but also subject to a desire for unlimited appropriation. The challenge that vegetal performativity poses becomes vivid here. Plants are practitioners of radical immanence. They engage in shared conversations with both biotic and abiotic modes of being, making no distinction whatsoever between their territory and earth. Vegetality is an intra-active entanglement of dividuation, openness, responsibility. I'm going to start using that word because I really like that. Responsibility, hospitality, and dispersivity. They never grow alone. I've said this a billion times. They never grow alone. It is an atmosphere in becoming. There are the traits of vegetal performativity that any human performance involving them needs to be responsive and accountable for. To perform vegetally is to face the inhuman, to face the otherkin, becoming responsible to the vegetal agentiality within and without, basically reconnecting to your plantness, breathing, growing together, letting pass through, extending hospitality to difference, not turning one's back. Perhaps a more adequate understanding of performance that speaks to vegetality rather than that of a singular event might be the avant-garde model of performance of everyday life. All the world is a stage. A radical blurring and overflowing of performance between life and art as developed by practitioners in the 1970s and 80s. Especially relevant are Latterman's Euclides performances centered on reproductive labor and maintenance art, almost imperceptible acts of taking care of how the world comes to matter, preconfiguring Guattari's three ecologies by decades. Latterman's Euclides in 1967 proposed maintenance art exhibition care, consisting of three parts: personal, general, and earth maintenance. Performing across three registers is very much in plant spirit. One specific, because that's what we do. This is why we keep saying, right? Personal, general, and earth maintenance. Remember, I always say how you are always simultaneous, plants in general are always simultaneously observing nature, in nature, and a part of nature. And we forget this. Personal, general, earth. I am always in nature with, observing nature and a part of nature. You can't separate these three. One specific mode of effective interaction embodies the immanent openness and responsibility touch. Vegetal bodies deprivilege visuality and in principle contradict the idea of any body being hierarchically above the other. The principle of radical openness is particularly strong in touching interactions. Here we can note two tendencies connected with two elemental realms in between which plants dwell. Root tips touch their way around and are also touched by mycorrhizae fungi. Aerial parts of plants are open, if not expectant to touch, by elements and living bodies, with intense zones of touching in zones of reproductive apparatus. In all directions, through touch, we can see how plants embody Deleuze's ethical questions how to behave in this world. With Catherine Thiel, this is a thought of pure performance. That does not mean producing an affirmation of the world according to the identity of what should be, measuring the possibility via the criterion of what is, and thus limiting this world from the very start. No, what is truly required is to produce an effective affirmation in the face of every single result the world ever takes. Conscious action, moment by moment, by taking everything in and recognizing what everything is, and then making a choice on where to go. Plants enact this active affirmation with their whole bodies as they shape themselves to intra-actions and involvements with other bodies, radically open and vulnerable to the outside, to the elements and animal bodies. They believe in possible alliances, but also withdraw without negating on an otherness. Man, I'm really loving this. How to be worthy of this ethical politics of openness and responsibility? It's a great question. How to be open, how to be worthy of this ethical politics of openness and responsibility. With Thiel again, Deleuze and Foucault turn the thought of the outside from harboring a promise of the advent of a better world, separated from here and now, into the very adventurous process of here and now itself, utterly immanent and this worldly. Through their adventurous exploration of their environment, plants embody and enact the radical immanence Deleuze and Guattari were looking for, being worthy of interactive effects that keep the world from collapsing into an immunitarian, paranoid grid of suffocating enclosures. Touching interaction is ultimately about opening to and encountering more of the world, intensifying fragility and indeterminacy. My goodness. Crucially, this intensification is always collective, an interactivity with other elements, inorganic and organic. Leaf is a mark intra-acted among many bodies, a joyful atmospheric performance. Performing vegetally is to affirming open up towards a possibility of intra-acting 1,000 tiny sexes, 1,000 tiny races, 1,000 tiny intersections. Vegetal touch, art of vegetalization. All right. Touch is the most intense site of vegetal negotiation with another. It is particularly sensitive domain. Is a particularly sensitive domain and the crucial site for figuring and cultivating an aesthetics of bio or phytophilia. Plants are extremely sensitive to touch, some of them even more than humans are. Mechanosensing, sensitivity to mechanical stress, is a capacity of virtually all cells in a plant. We should not forget that plants do not have a central neural center, or central nervous system, I guess is what they mean. Therefore, processing and possible reactions to mechanical impulses are very different from ours. Having in mind that mechanical signals contribute to most, if not all, aspects of plant development. Perhaps the main lesson here is that plants are fully engrossed in sensing their environment through touch, which if we really think about it, touch is one of those senses that we forget. we forget plants have, because we're starting to get to the understanding that plants can see, right? Photoreceptors all across. That plants can hear. There has been a lot of studies that have been talked about it. That plants can smell through the whole chemical reaction. Of course, we understand volatile organic chemicals and all the different types of chemicals that are released, and therefore that is a sense of smell. The sense of taste and the sense of touch are a little bit more difficult for us because we know that they can react to touch because you touch a leaf and so many different things can happen in a mimosa, but it's still a hard concept for a lot of people to really step into the idea that plants can feel the world through a sense of touch. It's just a little different. Literally with their entire bodies and creating local and distributed responses at different speeds and intensities. It has been shown, for example, that growth is slowed or stunted by repeated touching or rubbing. This is why I tell people, do not touch your plants. Do not touch your plants. Every once in a while, I see people who are working on plant performances, like especially plant music performances, and they think, oh, let me touch the plant. No, no, no. Just stop. Please stop. Please, no. You can hurt a plant by doing that. Please don't. Please don't. It's unnecessary. Your interaction with a plant is enough. You don't need to touch or hit. Even worse. Touch-induced growth inhibition is a general phenomenon in plant biology. Mechanically induced stress is inevitable in vegetal life, as plants are almost always exposed to strong mechanical stimuli from wind and rain. In other cases, such as in cross-pollination or carnivorous plants, touch is indeed welcomed or invited for. However, not any touch will do. It has to be a certain intensity and situatedness, as well as temporality. And flowers are shaped in ways to encourage specific insect movements and distribution of pollen. Some plants are more able to withstand more stress and even adapt and profit from it. In all cases, it seems that mechanically induced stress impacts all parts of the plant, altering their morphology and behavior on multiple timescales. Numerous experiments have shown that plants, as a pea plant, is able to remember touch trauma for weeks and months. And recent experiments have confirmed the sensitive species Mimosa pertica, recent experiments, a little bit older than recent, but that's okay, remembers, it's not habituation, learning responses even 28 days after. Thus, in fact, plants have long-term memory and are capable of learning beyond the stimulus response. They engage in practice, at least trial and error learning, to adapt to the changing environment. It is interesting to note that plants that are evolving most rapidly among all others are climbing plants, plants that learn intensely through their touching sensoria. Touch responsibility is a dynamic, ever-evolving performance in the plant kingdom, developed with and alongside other bodies. This opens up important but sensitive territory for human intra-activity. And if you think about this, this makes a lot of sense in the context of performance, right? Through that touch is definitely a big aspect in the way the performance develops. Okay, where are we? Now we return to the question of artistic interactions with vegetals. In performance art that is grounded in human social context, it is understood that touch is an effective and liminal experience. Entering another person's zone is an illustrative example. In 1977, at the entrance of the Galleria Comunale d'Arte Moderna, Bologna, two humans, artists Marina Abramovich and Ule, stood facing each other in a narrowed entrance. They were naked, and in between them, there was only just 1 foot or so of space. In order to enter the gallery, the audience had to squeeze themselves laterally, thus facing one of the performers and brushing against them with the front and back of the body. The performance, Imponderabilia, was interrupted by police after 90 minutes. I think a lot of her performance pieces have been interrupted by police. In May 2017, in Gallery Sick in Helsinki, 2 plants, one asparagus densiflorus and one Hedera helix, which is an ivy, hung opposite each other at human chest height in a narrow passage lined up with organza textiles. The plants were peeping with their branches through the holes made in fabric. To protect plants from excessive gaze, their niches were surrounded by satin curtains, creating a boudoir atmosphere. Due to constraints of capitalism on culture, textiles used were polyesters, but some dyes which colored them probably were of organic origin. The framework of the construction was made of wood. Thus, various forms of plant non-life were standing, and even before reaching the living plants, the spectator was confronted with the vegetal world. In this vegetalized version of Imponderabilia, composed by Mirko, the audience had to make a choice similar as in Marina and Ule's piece. Which plant person to face, which to brush with the chest, and which with the bark, and by which plant to be brushed. The audience had the choice not to pass through and turn back. This reminds me of back when I was doing my master's in Florence. At the time, Mancuso, with another artist that, of course, I do not remember their name, had created an exhibition at the Palazzo Stronzi. It was basically a giant slide. You know those like slip-and slides? The really big ones, not the water ones, but the ones that are you kind of put like a cloth down and then you slide down, the slide goes around and there's a tunnel. And before you got onto the slide, they literally put a little pouch on you. So it was kind of like a harness. And in that harness was a plant, a pea plant to be exact. And so every person had to slide down with the pea plant. And then the pea plant was taken to the back and the pea plant was going to be measured. So the plant, in effect, was part of the performance. It was very interesting, and I don't know what it was a part performance art in the sense of you sliding down with the pea plant, as in like together. And it was another part of it was also scientific experiment because they wanted to see the reaction of the pea plants as they were going down these slides. We went as a class. Mancuso took us as his students, and it was very interesting to see what they were up to. Down at the bottom were people from the International Laboratory for Plant Neurobiology, and they were grabbing the plants and then taking them and putting expert. But I wonder again, I understand their performance value, but I wonder how much the plants were really involved in the experiment as participants, as co-creators, and how many of the plants instead were just being used for their scientific knowledge. It's a good question. I should ask Mancuso what happened with that. Touching a stranger in public is a limit experience in performance art, a challenge to comfortable distances maintained in normalized daily life. With plants, socially speaking, this distance is at the same time inexistent and vast. Following the complexity of plants' receptivity, actually, I'm curious in the previous one, what would you have touched? Plant face to person? Or would you, brushing your chest with the back, like facing the plant, or with your back to the plant? Which one would you have chosen? Following the complexity of plants' receptivity and being briefly sketched above, touching a plant should be taken at least as seriously. As we shall see, except for, can we please teach children not to yank parts of plants as they walk down the street? Can we please teach them? Or to not pull out grass. I was literally giving a presentation once. I was in a place, people were sitting on the ground, on the grass, and I was literally giving a presentation about plant intelligence when the person in front of me was pulling out the plants, was pulling out the grass as I spoke. And at one point I stopped and I just stared at the person, and the person looked at me and then looked down at what they were doing, and then looked back up, and the realization, you could see the penny dropping, that the person realized, oh my goodness, I am listening to you talk about how intelligent these beings are, and I am unconsciously killing them. It was quite fascinating to see. So Jill asks, did they measure the plant energy before and after? Yes, they had a whole series of measurements that they took for each plant. So you would go and pick up the plant had a number. And so key was numbered for them to be able to take measurements before. Then you would put key in your little harness, which was literally was a harness with a little pouch here. And you put the plant in the pouch, and then you sat on the slide and you slid down, and then you would walk and you would give the plant back. And so they took the measurements before and after. As we shall see, some artistic practices seem to imply that touching plants automatically creates intimacy, but this is an anthropocentric presumption, for in the case of humans, this indeed mostly is the case. Very few plants have the ability to run away or bite if they are not complicit with this interaction. Yeah, it's not the same. Digital media has been a particularly open field for experimentation with vegetal beings. Interactive installation Acousmaflor by Sinoscosme or whatever, invites by Sino something, invites visitors to touch leaves and branches of different potted plants hanging from the ceiling, which we have just read before hurts the plants, but they do it anyway. As a result of human touch, the electrostatic difference between fingertips and plants is via a digital interface translated into sound. The sounds are mostly pleasurable and intriguing, but also possibly problematic, rendering that feel a lot like rainforest birds. Touch is very much taken for granted here. Now, the artists in their statement say that sometimes it is sufficient not to touch the plant, but to come close. It is sufficient, by the way. It is sufficient. Do not have to touch. However, the visitors perform all sorts of more or less violent movements, and this is why they shouldn't. Even when the sound becomes a sort of drumming, which could indicate the plant's feeling of pain. Since these interactions are part of the artist's presentation of the work, the artist sees these interactions as unproblematic. Really? Therefore, we should say that this work is far from what the artist's description as alliance between nature and digital technology. Yeah, no, not an alliance at all. And we see this all the time. Even more problematic is the now classic digital artwork by Christina Sommer and Lauren something, interactive plant growing, where touching plants or coming close to them, again through measurement of electrostatic differences, creates visualization on the screen. In fact, artists themselves describe the plants as natural and tangible interface between visitors and technology. Here, plants are fully at service of human authors and visitors, even though they are mated to actors. Exclusion does not mean liberation. We find a much more responsible and responsive approach in Terike Hapoya's interactive installation Dialogue, where the very breathing of humans inside a room with trees triggers a whistle-like response, thus intensifying the everyday circulation of carbon dioxide. Touching does not need to occur directly, but can be mediated more subtly, for example, via carbon dioxide and oxygen. Intensity that is more attuned to vegetals can be seen in Spela, Petrick's Scotopoesi, where the artist casts shadow on crests for 12 hours a day. Yeah, well. The work challenges both the plant bodies that need crests. I'm assuming that that's an Arabidopsis, and that's what they're calling crests, because it's probably a water cress, which is an Arabidopsis. The work challenges both the plant bodies that need to grow in reduced light conditions, but also the vegetalized artist shrinks. I wouldn't think that this could be okay if the human was to stand next to the plant. For 12 hours a day, you take the light on, where you stand in like blinding light for 12 hours. How would you like it? Bodies are effectively touched by each other at a distance and are touched by forces of light and gravity. This is an uneasy, potentially unsuccessful intercognition, accurate and critical of the times of Anthropocene or Plantatiocene. Never heard those terms. As more affirmative engagements with vegetal bodies through touch occur, we can look at Annette Arlander's developing body of works where she stands with trees, bushes, and also earthly formations for extended period of times. This I'm starting to like. Let's hope. Arlander is engaged in, see, but this is where performance can also be so dangerous. Now you've seen all these others. Arlander is engaged in a series of performances in various locations as part of her research project, Performing with Plants. In one of the pieces in this series, Tree Calendar, Arlander visits a tree and spends time with it, sitting in Key's branches, standing next to Key, or embraced by Key in the case of bushy trees. In other experiments, as part of this research project, she visits with the same tree many times. Her blog posts vividly describe how she tries to find a way to approach each plant in question, looking for a position and also trying to find an adequate angle from which to video document this piece. This use of technology creates a potential tension between the performativity and representation, but let us stay with touch. And Arubio's performances involve different modes of touching trees, from caressing to literally acrobatic exercise with ropes and climbing gear, such as swinging from the branches of a huge apple trees in All the Trees I Met. Rubio here explores the dynamic of being offspring of the tree. I'm an apple suspended, a red one. I'm playing with my fragility, with sensuality and gravity just before falling down. Really? Art, I love art. Don't get me wrong, I love art, but performance art can be really bizarre. Branches and trunks of some trees are indeed bodies more ready to welcome humans. And in Arlander and Rubio's tree performances, the human bodies become more like a smaller climbing plants that seek support from the bigger cousins, as long as there's permission asked. Essie, in her words, I'm not going to even pronounce that last one, in her words, seeks to perform the plant logic by working out through long-term practice with vegetal bodies. She calls this a professional relationship, stained all over by my dangerous desires and love. Diagonally to the discourses of becoming plant, Essie acknowledges, obviously, the attempt to perform plant logic is doomed to fail. But as an artist, I'm interested in the aesthetics and actions and the joy this attempt produces. Joy is central here, and the artists understand it as an effective interaction among the bodies, not as pertaining to the human subject. These are shared knowings that stem from vegetal wisdom. One can get involved with them with humbleness and responsibility. Okay, so far I'm okay. Etsy continues, the vegetal kingdom doesn't care much about me, and yet it does in its own particular way. Yes, humans are not the central concern in vegetal life, or to be fair, they should not be. Plants do not crave to get included in the human art scene. Well, we don't know that. Do we? Do we know that? Do we know that? They are engrossed in extraordinarily complex performances with multitudes of other more interesting bodies. This is true. I will agree with this statement. However, thanks to vegetal hospitality and openness, there's a space and a time for humans to become part of it. This is already a much more respectable approach. Through painstaking and intense process of forming common notions, some of us subtly can engage with the plants in the way that comes closer to how bees and mycorrhiza do. This begins with giving oneself away, as when Essie simply embraces the grass in the gesture of abandon in her Garden Works 1. I do that. I do that. I do that. I do that. I just embrace grass in such gratitude. And I ask if it's okay. And I sit for a long time. And yeah. Or like Martin Arnell in Sporing Lips of Transposed Desire, the artist acts out autoerotic. What's up with the autoerotic part, man? There's a lot of erotic stuff in here, sensuality and sexual acts of autoerotic fantasies on a tree covered in fungus, in an interspecies expression of queer desire. The video performance is an intense burst of sexuality and also an ironic play on amateur porn where nature is just a backdrop. There is an interesting art piece that was people literally having sex with plants. It was quite interesting. It was very sexual. It's very sexual. I don't know if the artist was Chinese or Korean, but it was very sexual. It was like full on from sensuality to sexuality with plants. It was very interesting. It was interesting because it wasn't a backdrop. It wasn't like I'm auto doing things to myself with plants. It was literally a show of deep desire and lust for the plants. And in that aspect, it was interesting. Here it is radically other body, a fungus and the tree that holds it, that is the subject of the artist's lips curling. Consensually and freedom can be questioned here from the fungal and vegetal side, but intensity might also melt the possible effective indifference. Touching surfaces are many, and they are not always exterior. In Ruda, that life, Karl Heinz and Bartaku's Aronia M. Overture. The extract of Aronia berry is put in touch with palate, but intra-action is not that much about taste and eating. The berry's astringent properties modify human voicing properties, thus making an unchoir of inhuman sounds. As a signpost, these intricate affective encounters should be led under the idea of organizing enjoyment together and apart, which amounts to becoming fascinated by enhancing and expanding non-human pleasure modes, as nicely put by Timothy Morton. I'm okay with a lot of these if the plants are actually being invited into the conversation of planning these types of performance pieces. If instead you're randomly choosing a plant and just going for it, I'm not for it, man. The plant should be a part, should be able to have the say, and you should be able to hear the no when a plant says it. Direct access into the vegetal performativity is not easy. An alternate line is to get involved into the existing effective assemblages, such as the entanglement between plants and pollinators. A long-term project by Christina Stadboer and Ula called Melliferopolis spreads knowledge and celebrates bee-plants alliance through workshops and performances at the interface between arts and sciences. Here, touching interactions with plants unfurled together with bees who have mastered this type of interaction. A lot of slow knowledge is needed, and sciences are an ally here. We learn from Natasha Meyer interviews with plant scientists to the extent to which they get vegetalized in the process of turning attention to plants. Quicker pathways, and again, that whole paper was reviewed before, so you can find that in plant sensing. Quicker pathways tend to reproduce hierarchies, such as in Pony Express, popular interactive environment, ecosexual bathhouse, where they play with queer and BDSM aesthetics to get human enticed into effective interactions with vegetals. Why is it always like BDSM? The queer part I get. The queer part makes perfect sense to me. But why we always get into BDSM aesthetics? It's almost as if, I don't know. This is, again, as long as the plants were being asked. In some environments, the spectators are asked to touch flowers with gloves to pollinate manually. But in most cases, it seems that touches are just for humans' fun. It is attractive, but possibly mostly or only for vertebrates. Exactly. The plant. Who says the plant is having fun? Touch offers a possibility for responsibility or becoming otherwise. It is always difference that is being touched, the inhuman in us and the non-vegetal in plants too. For many bodies, the very chance of growth and possibilities of thriving are at stake. There are no abstract knowledges here. Each plant has its own unique singular dynamics, which demands humbleness and attentiveness akin to that of Charles Darwin's experiments. There's Darwin! Darwin again. But more delicate still, more devoted and mutualistic with indeterminacy at heart. It is also subtleness about molecularity, both chemical and non-identitarian. Plants are attuned to effective touches with bodies lighter and more minute than ours. It might well be the case that humans are not yet prepared to directly touch many plant species without doing harm. Yes, this is the case. Yes. Yes, yes. We should be very careful. An aesthetics of touch begins from zones of proximity or neighborhood, and only through effective complicity, this field might fold into a zone of indiscernibility. There are other ways of touching and being touched beyond the mechanical ones, and fingers are not the only surface of touch. Lungs can tickle too, even deeper. Perhaps the first step is then, with ecosexuals Annie Sprinkle and Beth Stephens, to talk dirty to the plants. Whisper raunchy feelings. Why is it all sexual, man? Why is it all sexual? Be a tiny, I get we're talking about pleasure, but there's also laughing. Isn't that a pleasure too? Be a tiny wind or a droplet of rain to the plant. Tree trunks are more ready to accept our bodies, thus hug and stroke her trees freely. Be a support for a climbing plant. Feel a pea plant extend its coils towards you. But if you are to accept this advance, you need to be ready to remain still and become a support structure. I'm going to read that again. Be a support for a climbing plant. Feel a pea plant extend its coils towards you. But if you are to accept this advance, you need to be ready to remain still and become a support structure. Practices of dispersed attentiveness means opening the entire body, becoming response able to that wasp that lands on your shoulder. Perhaps she thought you were a flower. Exposing oneself to touch in interspecies context is to replay with indeterminacy once again. Each touch carries a possibility of invitation, accepted or declined, hesitant or fervent, from multiple sides. As such, it is a critical space of the nature culture of radical immanent hospitality. Conclusions. We've made it to the conclusions. Four. Conclusions. Vegetal performativity. Ontology of performance of the vegetal world decisively pushes against theories of performance that are based on semionics as the primary mode of expression. It represents an alternative mode to that of J.L. Austin's speech acts. Plants perform through intra-affect-acts. This mode of performativity, however, does not sit easily within any of the present theories that we have at hand. We have outlined how vegetal performativity aligns with, but also challenges, affect theories, especially their inherent human-animal presumptions. Plants give little heed to any notion of autonomous subject, and thereby are more in tune with lineages of affect theory that are interested in transmission of affect. However, vegetals can't fit squarely within this generous framework either, without bending, if even further, to house an openness that is an individual and common atmospheric, more precisely. Plants are beings of interaction, but their hospitality and responsibility seems to transgress any possibility of subtle agential cut. Their differentiation does not formalize into subjectivities and objectivities. In their local interactions, bring into play the whole earth. They interact responsibilities with multitudes of elements, and in doing so, they play out the possibilities of thriving and nurturing of the world beyond their own specific body. They are interested in producing difference, in liminal experience. This is how they perpetuate atmospheres of joy, even being open to the possibility of their own decay. In line with the radical immanence of vegetal being, vegetalized practices need to move through theoretical practical exploration with forms of hospitality, responsibility, and openness that are radically asubjective and transcorporeal. Arts have much to offer, especially in conjunction with plant sciences. One line of becoming that we have individuated a possibility for true shared conversations with the vegetal realm is the realm of touch. Touch is one of the most sensitive and open territories where human animals can get involved in this mode of performance. With caution, please. With caution, gentleness, and responsibility, right? I respond in kind. Vegetal touching is everywhere, always, already in intra-affect action between plants and certain animals. And so we have some space to move because we are animals, but we need to step back into that realm. Enveloping us all, yet human animals are still newcomers to the arts of vegetalized responsibility. With a beginner's mind and a fervent desire of vegetalization, inhuman touches might enact active affirmations of radical difference as collective multi-species joy. Interesting. Very interesting. Very, very interesting ending. What do you think? How do you see it? I'm gonna have to noodle on this. I'm gonna have to like think about it for a moment. So this is aesthetics of inhuman touch. I still don't like the fact that they used inhuman. I would have liked other kin touch. Notes for vegetalized performance. I do think it was very interesting. I think it was really interesting to help us start to branch out between what does performance really look like and how does performance from the perspective of performance as in acting, right? Like I create a performance piece versus performances in all the world's a stage, which I think these help in both hands and both sides of this. And I do like a lot that the end result was like one of the ways we can start to enter into this relationship is through touch, because we're trying to step out of the idea that stepping out of kind of our humanness, which is that touch is an intimate act of some sort, and enter into the relationness that plants have with each other and with other animals, which is that touch is a common form of creating relationness. But you need to be able to respond. Touch is not about I do what I want, but is more of I test out things, and then I listen for the response and I respond to that response. And I like that they use words like, hospitality and um, response ability. So my ability to respond. I think these are important factors that are going to it. But I'm super curious as to what you think about this. So, leave me a comment. Let me know what your thoughts. If you enjoyed this, please make sure that you like it or you share it with others, that you subscribe if you're here on YouTube, or if you want to join and jump in on the Naturally Conscious community, you can come and leave a comment there and you can have part of our conversations on there. We have a lot of events happening in the Naturally Conscious community on a regular basis. We have the book club, and we have our writing group, and we have our leadership group, and we also have creative greenhouses where we workshop different pieces. But more than anything, we have even various different places where we're having conversations about exactly these types of topics from the perspective of everyday life. I mean, the thing I love the most about the Naturally Conscious community is that it is a place for us to explore these alternative ways of thinking and being with plants, of co-creating and partnership and learning from, but also being a part of all of these different aspects of the human plant relationship and this panthropology that we're developing, while at the same time making it very connected to everyday life. So areas for us to talk about: what does plant-inspired business look like? What is plant-inspired art and music in particular look like? What is it look like when I'm thinking about what are the decisions that I make on a regular basis, or how is it that I apply everything that I'm experiencing in an everyday life? Because here we're obviously talking about performance. And if you're a performance artist, fantastic. I think you got a lot out of this. But even if you're not a performance artist, these types of papers help us reimagine what are these types of relationships, and it gives us more experimentation, more ability for us to open ourselves to the plants around us, whether it's, house plants that I live with, or whether it's a specific tree or grass that I go and I visit on a regular basis, and to further develop my relationship by using these aspects of things that I learned here about touch, for example, and about, response ability and all these different aspects. So it goes a long way in changing the ontology by our everyday actions. And our everyday actions can be sometimes very, 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 very small changes. And the Naturally Conscious community is the place where we can have these conversations, where we can talk about the fact that we can have a very vulnerable and open conversation about what are the possibilities, what does it look like, what would it be, and how would this come about if I was to experiment with it, what happens and such. So with that being said, we've already been here a long time. I am so excited that you came back and that you've been here with us. And for those of you that are watching on the replay, thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you next week. We will be back for another paper, and who knows what's going to come up next. I've got a list to choose from. So remember, resist the urge to hold back your emerging green brilliance. This is me, Tigria Gardenia. I'm out. See you soon. Bye.